The Christian life is so much more than just what happens on a Sunday, and far more about the way in which we live out the gospel each and every day. Welcome to Southwest Church Online. Welcome, Church Online community. My name is CJ McFadden, your online pastor, and it's my privilege to serve and support the needs of those who engage with us across our various digital spaces. If you've joined us here before, you know that Southwest Church is a gospel-centered, multi-ethnic, intergenerational church that loves discipleship. And it's our desire to see people get planted, rooted, growing, and going on their journey as Jesus followers. If it's your first time here with us, well, now you're in the know. As a church that loves discipleship, we're excited to have you join us here today, and we can't wait to help you take your next steps. One of the easiest ways to do this is by simply texting the word SW online to 94000. This text option will help point you to additional online opportunities like our weekly newsletter, our Southwest Church app, or other digital resources like podcasts, daily devotions, as well as tons of other previous messages and content. So again, text the words SW Connect to 94000 and let us help you get connected and stay connected with all that Southwest has to offer. Now, we'd love for you to open up your digital message notes feature and get ready for a special message from Pastor Mark Clark as we continue in our current series, What Would Jesus Say, in just a moment.
I stand to introduce an invited guest who is the most oft requested speaker here at Southwest Church. Pastor Mark Clark of Bayside Church is here with us today as we continue with our What Would Jesus Say series. Me and Mark and Aaron and April, we've been friends, I guess, since we got here, 7 years or so. Mark grew up in Toronto, Canada, so a shout out to our Canadian brothers and sisters. And he grew up in Toronto and founded the great Village Church of Vancouver, British Columbia, a church that grew by leaps and bounds, thousands and thousands of people that they led to Jesus. It's just one of the great stories of the gospel in the last 15 years. A few years ago, Mark sensed a call to come and help us here in California, and moved up to Sacramento to be with the great Bayside Church led by our own pastor, Pastor Ray Johnston, and he's been serving there. He is a wonderful husband to Aaron, 3 precious girls. Mark always says that it's him and 4 girls, which means he has 4 mothers. And he is just a family guy, an awesome pastor. He's gonna bless you today. But he's also a budding, prolific author, now on his 3rd book, The Problem of God, The Problem of Jesus, The Problem of Life, The Problem of God, being arguably my favorite apologetics text. It is just amazing. He is brilliant, he is funny, he is a little brash and all that good stuff. And I love him to death. Now, the only thing is that he thinks he can play golf as good as I can. But that we all know that what the truth is. Can I get a witness right there? Southwest, put your hands together and welcome my friend, Pastor Mark Clark.
Come on, baby, come on. Love it. Thank you, sir. Thank you. How you guys doing? You doing good? Oh, Ricky, you do lie to these people that often or what? Come on, man. Good to be here. Any Canadians in the house? I am Canadian, yeah, come on. Look at all these snowbirds. Dude, 20% tariff, what is going on here? What? Okay, you know what? I'm not going to talk about what you asked me to talk about. I'm just going to talk about Canadian politics, all right? All right, Matthew chapter 5. Now, we're going to be talking about what Jesus has to say to business people. Very specific, very cool challenge that Ricky said, hey, I want you to come and speak about this. So it's been cool kind of studying this and thinking about how to hit this and assign Matthew chapter 5. So if you go to Bible, Matthew chapter 5, very interesting text, famous text if you know it. If you've been hanging around the church at all, this will be known to you. But think of it through the filter of Jesus speaking to business people. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You gotta keep the saltiness, right? You gotta endure. A constant theme of the Bible is that you endure in following Jesus. Jesus says in Revelation that he's gonna give the crown of life to the one who endures, meaning it's not just a question of whether you started to follow Jesus, it's whether you can actually end your life following Jesus. Anybody, listen, think about marriage. Any moron can get married, right? Any man can trick a woman into marrying him, right? It's like, I had to do that. Every guy in here tricked a woman into marrying him if you're married. The question though is not whether you started a marriage. Anybody can get married. Any two people can get their nice little, tuxedo on and their nice wedding dress and show up to a wedding. That's why I get so annoyed at weddings, all right? Because these two people who don't know anything about each other are sitting there going, oh, I love you, Tommy. I love you too, Sarah. I wrote you a poem. I'm gonna do my own vows now. Tommy, T means tremendous, all right? And you're like, shut up. You don't even know each other. Anyway, the point about a marriage is not the first day, right? That wedding is easy. It's the last day, right? What about the last day of your marriage? Did you stay faithful? Did you flourish? Did you love her like Christ served the church? Did you respect him like Jesus asked you? All of that. And so Jesus goes, I don't want you to lose the saltiness. I don't want you to stop following me or stop being salt. And then he says, verse 14, you're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand. It gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. What a beautiful image that Jesus gives. Now, think about it through this filter, the filter of the business person, what Jesus has to say. I don't want to have, let me ask this question. Do you guys have regrets in your life? Do you have anything that you can think about that you like regret? I regret that thing. I remember what I regret. As Ricky said, I have 3 daughters now, 18, 16, and 14. And we were on a vacation down here in Palm Springs in 2010. And my friend called me up and he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to buy this thing. It's called Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, what is this Bitcoin? He's like, I don't know, but just look it up. And it was 30 cents for a Bitcoin in 2010. It's now $87,000 per Bitcoin. But at that time, I sat down, he said, pull your computer out. And I pulled my computer out, I was on the phone, I got my credit cards ready. And I said, okay, I'm gonna try to buy this Bitcoin. I got it. And then I start to hear this noise. Daddy, come swimming with us. We're in Palm Springs. And I'm like, shut up, I'm trying to buy some Bitcoin. And my wife comes in, Mark, you gotta get the towels for the kids. You gotta get the laundry. You're gonna figure this out. They gotta go swimming. They wanna go swimming. I'm like, okay, just buying some Bitcoin. She's like, what is Bitcoin? What are you talking about? Shut your computer and let's get out of here. And I'm like, no, come on. Daddy, come make memories. No, I want the Bitcoin. Okay, it's just a little complicated. I'll figure this out later. And I closed my laptop and I never went back to it. I regret having children. They just suck resources and they stop me from being a multimillionaire. Regret, it's a terrible thing in life. Now here's the thing, I don't want you to regret a very important thing that Ricky has dreamt up in his heart, which is that business people understand your life, your work. It's not just business in that sense, but it's work. What is your work? Your work isn't just something you get up and do, it's something that you were born to do. It's something wired in you to do, but to do it with purpose and recognize that it's actually part of your identity to work. The fact that every human life, if you live the average life of an average human being on planet Earth, you will work 15 years, 7 months, and 3 days of your life. The question is, what did you do with that work? Did you do something significant? Did you do something that mattered? And here's the other thing. Understand that your work is sacred work. There is no such thing as a sacred secular divide. Ricky and I don't do the important work of God in the world and you are just doing whatever. Your work is just as sacred as our work. I want you to know that. There is no so in Bible college, I had 2 best friends. One of them's name was Shant and the other one was Brad. We met in the first year of Bible college in a theology class, in a Bible class, and we were gonna be pastors, we were gonna be preachers. We were super excited to become preachers and leaders in the church. And so that was all fine and good for the first year. But in the second year, my friend Shant arrived at school, and he walked up to us with his Bible under his arm, and he said, I noticed something at the grocery store this week. I noticed that all the cereal boxes had free movie passes on the front of them. If you bought a box of cereal, you got to go to a movie for free. And at that time, movies in Toronto were about $13 to go to a movie. And of course, a box of cereal is $4. And so he said, I noticed the math on this. So I just bought out the entire grocery store. And then I went to the next grocery store and I bought that one out too. And here's what I did. I went to every grocery store I could find in Toronto and bought all the cereal and gave all the money to the food bank. And I sat in my living room and I cut out all the movie passes. And then I went and I stood in front of a movie theater, and every person that walked up, I sold these for $10 a pop. So there's say the consumer was saving $3, I was making $6, and now I've had to hire people because I'm making so much money. And we realized in that moment, this man wasn't gonna be a pastor. He was gonna be rich. And that's what he did. He left Bible college, we all graduated together, and me and Brad went off into the ministry to teach the Bible and be pastors, and Shant started a burger joint. He put together $100,000 through hard work and started this burger joint in Toronto, 300 square feet, and he started selling burgers out of it. And there was a lineup on the first day and a lineup on the second day, to the point where he started running out of burgers at noon every single day and couldn't keep enough burgers to sell them. And so he decided to open a second burger joint, and then a third one, and then a fourth one, and a fifth one, and a sixth one, and a seventh one, until he opened 14 burger joints, and then a company came in and bought them off of him for a lot of money. Now, some people would look at that and think that that's a tragedy, that Shant never went into ministry. But that's the problem. That's how we think. That's not how God thinks. See, God, Jesus, looks at people and says, you're the salt of the earth. You are to be in, what the image of salt gives is you're to be integrated. That's the first image. You're to be part of the earth, not separate from it, sitting around church, just doing Bible studies 7 days a week. Do you know what the earth is? Are you part of the earth? If you are a CFO or CEO or a business person, or you run a thing, or a stay-at-home mom, whatever you are part of this earth. The question is, are you salt in it? Are you integrated into it so that you can affect it to the glory of God and for its good? That's the question. So I had this heart for Uganda years ago, and there was this people group in Uganda. We went there and visited. They needed a hospital and they needed a school. And so I was like, well, what can I do to help these people? And then I realized, okay, I'm a pastor. I could pull a bunch of people in a room and I could try to raise money for them. And so I went to someone and I said, how much money do I need to give these people another 30 years? And they said about $1 million. And I'm like, okay, how am I gonna do that? And then I said, I know what I'll do. I'll do a golf tournament. So it's up in Vancouver, church golf tournament, try to pull people together and raise a bunch of money. But in order to do that, I needed one donor to give a lot of money to get the thing going. And so I met with my staff and I said, hey, I'm going out with the biggest donor in our church this afternoon. I want to inspire him and ask him for money. And they're like, okay, well, you should ask him for $500,000, half of the $1 million. I'm like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? You want to ask someone for $500,000? You go do it. I'm not doing that. And they said, well, at least pray about it. And I said, the most I'm gonna ask this guy for is maybe $100,000, $200,000 to get things moving. So I'm driving to the lunch to go meet him, and I start to pray, and I ask the Holy Spirit, what do you want me to ask him for? What do you want me to ask him for? And I got to the lunch, and all his business people and all his money people were there. And I sat across the lunch table, and we started having this thing, and he said, okay, so what do you want from me? And I went to say, hey, if you could just give me $100,000, $200,000, get this golf tournament. And then the Holy Spirit stopped me. And he said, no. You're not asking him for what I'm asking you to ask him for. Ask him for $500,000. And so he said, what do you want from me? I said, I want $500,000. I'm like, what the 500 what? And he looked at me, he's like, what? You want $500,000 from me for what? And I said, well, we're gonna do this thing. We're gonna give it 30 years in Uganda. And he calls the waitress over. She comes over, and he looks at her and says, you tell her what you just told me. And I said, well, Uganda and da-da-da. She's like, well, how much? I said, $500,000. She goes, well, I think you should give it to him. And he goes, okay, deal. And he shook my hand across the table. And that day, $500,000 began a tournament that ended up raising $1.2 million for kids in Uganda. Now, here's my point. Why was he able to do that beautiful kingdom impact thing? Because he was the CEO and founder of an oil and gas company that was very successful. If he was a pastor, he wouldn't have given $500 to the project. Your life is meant to fund ministry, to get the mission of Jesus accomplished in the world. And it could be through money. It could be the way that you treat people. It could be the way you carry yourself. All of it is the work that God has given to us. It's not sacred and secular. 1 Peter says all of us are a royal priesthood. Every single one of you is a priest to the world, to the little small part of the world that Jesus has given you in the world. Doesn't matter what you do for a living, you are a royal priest, and you are meant to re-enchant the world. You know, our world is very disenchanted. People are depressed, they're anxious, they're suicidal, they're isolated. And the world God doesn't exist. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no spirituality. This is what people believe, and they live a very disenchanted life. Charles Taylor, the great philosopher, said, our job in this world as Christians is to re-enchant the world, to make it look to the world as if the secular story is so lame. So my wife walked into a coffee shop the other day, and she's standing in line, and she hears God say, go and talk to that homeless guy. And she looks over and there's a homeless guy standing over and sitting over in the corner, just kind of twitching around, which she was fine with because she hangs out with me, didn't make her uncomfortable. And she walks over, she put her hand on his shoulder and started to talk to him and say, what's your story and who are you? And he began to cry and weep. And he said, man, I woke up desperate this morning and I asked God, if you exist, I want you to send somebody over to ask me what my story is and to put their hand on my shoulder. See, my wife doesn't claim to hear from God every single day, but Jesus says, my sheep will hear my voice. And the question is, in the normal, everyday things of life, do you hear his voice? Do you hear his voice at Starbucks? I'm not talking about in church. Of course you hear the voice here. You got one of the best preachers in America opening the Bible up to you. Why'd they laugh, bro? Oh, you're serious? Yes, we are serious. You got Ricky Jenkins down here. Unbelievable. You're gonna hear the Bible preached, the gospel preached every single week. You're gonna hear from God, but I'm talking about in your normal, when you leave these walls. Do you hear Jesus speak to you in the coffee shops, at the golf course? Do you understand that this isn't just time in between the time? This is the time. Every single moment of your life, there's no sacred, secular divide. It's Jesus calling you at every moment of your life to do something important. Someone said, I read recently, that when we are born, we look like our parents, but when we die, we look like our choices. All the choices you have decided to make in your life, the choices you will make when you wake up tomorrow, all the choices in every area, whether you're at work, at play, whatever you're doing, the question is, do you understand your job to be sacred? Your identity, your purpose is your work. Notice that God didn't sit with Adam and Eve and say, I want you both to be pastors. He said, I want you to till the earth, fill the earth and subdue it. I want you to take the beauty of Eden and bring it out into the world. Realize that's God giving them something to do. It's work, it's a role in the world. Do you understand? We've got this messed up because when we talk about finding ourselves and our identity, we just think it's about inward and finding our personality profile. And so we do our little Enneagram test and we go, oh, I'm a 6. And go, oh, yeah, I'm late for meetings because I'm a 6. No, you're late for meetings because you're a loser. And you don't respect anybody's time. That's why. Don't give me your DISC test or your Myers-Briggs. Oh, I'm so mean because I'm a Myers-Briggs. Shut up. You're a loser and you're selfish. But everyone's saying, oh, I look inside myself and I want to find myself. I want to find my own personality profile. I want to figure out who I am. And so I'm going to, listen, here's what God says. You want to figure out who you are? You want to know what your purpose is on planet Earth? It's that you have something to do. I've given you a task. Bring the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, no matter what your work is, that's your task. And don't think that that's just a church thing. No matter what your job is. Some of you work in politics and you think, well, I can't weave God into my politics. I don't know what my task on the earth is. So I was, last summer, this guy called me up and he said, I want you to come. He has this church in San Francisco, okay? So he said, I want you to come and I want you to do a sermon on gender in San Francisco. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm sure that you just happen to be away this weekend, all right? You just, it's on the calendar, yeah. Happen to be a vacation with my friends. Okay, so I gotta go preach on gender in San Francisco last summer. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I start preparing, I start reading psychologists and philosophers and theologians, try to figure out how to nuance this. And so during that time, I'm reading all these different psychologists. I'm reading one book called The Female Brain by Dr. Luann Brizendine. And of course, I have 3 daughters, so I'm trying to figure out the female brain anyway, and how it works. And what Dr. Luann Brizendine talks about is that in utero, according to science, when you are literally inside your mother gestating for 9 months, that what happens at some point, about the 7-week period, your brain starts to flood with one of 2 things. For males, the brain floods with testosterone and it increases your sexual urges and the urges for aggression. But for females, something else happens. The corpus callosum, which is what connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain, actually starts to enhance, and it starts to take the communication ability between those things and enhance them into a super highway of very fast information. So picture a woman's brain in being flooded with estrogen, and all of her communications, so she's running like a 7-lane super highway. Cars are moving around, things are just smooth, right? But when testosterone floods the male brain, it literally kills the corpus callosum. And so it's like an old country road with potholes everywhere, and things are trying to get through, and it's like, and that's why when he opens the fridge and he's looking, he can't see it. It is not there. That's science, all right? And then the ladies come by and they're like, it's here, you idiot, all right? And just whatever, and you're like, what the? That wasn't there 2 seconds ago. That's what it's your brain, right? When there's intimacy involved in your marriage, the man, he's a one-track brain. That's all he's thinking about, right? And he thinks he's Don Juan DeMarco, and that's where he's at. But for ladies, there's all kinds going on, right? I gotta call my sister, I gotta get milk, I gotta pick up the kids for school. Doesn't matter who you are. So when estrogen fills the brain, it makes a woman a particular way. And so I was explaining all this to this church. But then I was thinking about the problem is we create these archetypes of what a male is and what a female is. But when I read the Bible, those archetypes aren't there, because sometimes it's not just women keeping a house, it's women running things. You ever heard of Deborah in the Bible, right? Book of Judges, she's going to war for her country and making big decisions to kill a bunch of people for the good of Israel. For men, when men say, well, an archetype of a male is just he's about tools and rough stuff and sports and whatever. So when is David, so I start writing these notes and I'm like, when is a woman being more of a woman? When she's keeping a home like Martha, or when she's going to war for her country like Deborah? When is a man being more of a man? Is it when he's slaying Goliath like David, or is it when David's out in the field with his little guitar and he's writing poetry? Which one of those is more manly? And of course, it's neither of them, because they're both men and female, and this is how it works. And so I wrote all these notes, but I didn't understand why I had all this information and what I was supposed to do. So I got there to preach to this church, and I'm sitting in the front row just before the service starts, and the pastor looks at me and goes, oh, by the way, I just wanted to let you know, I know I didn't tell you this, Condoleezza Rice goes to our church. For the younger generation, that's Secretary of State under Bush II. And so she was a big player. She was a big deal. And so I'm like, wait, what? Condoleezza Rice is gonna be in this audience? This would have been way better. I would have spent way more time on this. So I stand up and I look, and Condoleezza Rice is sitting 3rd row, man. And I'm up there and I'm like, oh, hey, Condoleezza, doctor, all right? And I start to preach. And I get to this part and I start talking about, Dr. Luann Brizendine and the work that she does with little children and how she'll put a little boy in a room and give him a doll. And she'll put a little girl in a room and give her a fire truck. And within 5 minutes, the little girl has wrapped that fire truck in a blanket and she's rocking it to sleep. And the little boy comes in and he grabs the little baby and smashes its head on the ground. And little girls are playing house and building a home and thinking up companies. The little boy just like, die, I hate you. And it's wired somehow into our brains. And so I'm presenting all this and I get to the part and I said, so what's a man? Is a man Goliath or is a man writing poetry? And what is a woman, by the way? What does it mean to be a woman? And I realized in that moment why God gave me that. Because right in that moment I said, when is a woman? When she's keeping a home? And then I looked right at Condoleezza Rice and I said, or when she's leading her country to war. And she was like, So anyway, Condi called me the other day and, what? She didn't, but I call her Condi because we're close. Anyways, point being, thank goodness Condi doesn't work at a church. Her life, what is she called to do in politics? What are you called to do in the company you help run or the boards you sit on or whatever it is that Jesus has given you to do? You know what he's telling you to do? Be salt, be integrated in a special way that brings glory to God. Because here's the thing about salty. Don't you love the image of salty? Why does he say this? Salt. You know what salt is? It's interesting. It's flavor. What does salt do? It brings more flavor, right? Right? If you're eating food and it doesn't taste good, what do you say? Give me the salt, right? All right, now it tastes fine. So here's the question. Are you salty? As a Christian, are you salty or are you boring? Do you light up every room you walk in? Or are you the mundane, boring, domesticated? I would never, if that's what a Christian is, judgmental and lame, I don't want anything to do with that. Or are you walking in a room going, let's go. Let's live for the glory of God. Here's how I live. Here's how I spend money. Here's what I do with my body. Here's what I do with sexuality. Here's what I do with my family. Here's what I do. Here's what I do. And people go, my gosh, what did he or she have that I want? This is salty. Instead of these domesticated, boring Christians that walk around and the world goes, whatever they believe, I want the opposite. Jesus said, come on, be salty. Don't be boring. I was at a restaurant a couple weeks ago and I went to the bathroom, and as I was leaving, I was washing my hands and these two Indian guys walked in and they were laughing and they were singing and they were dancing. And I was like washing my hands and I walked out of the bathroom and I'm like, man, I was born in the wrong culture. My boring, suburban, white, it's like, what do I have? My friends don't dance around and sing. That's what I want to do. No one does that. It's just boring. I grew up in I love the cultures where it's like 30 of you live in one house for generations, where a wedding goes on for a week. Think about a boring white culture. It's like an hour and a half, all right? Get this wedding wrapped up. I got stuff to do here, all right? I gave my $100, let's get on with it. Just boring. Got no food. Love all my Italian friends. You walk into an Italian house, it sounds like they all hate each other. All they do is scream and yell at each other. I'm like, yeah, that's what I want, man. I worked at the most multi-ethnic church in North America when I was a junior high pastor. It was in Toronto, top 5 multi-ethnic cities in the world. And so church was crazy because all these different ethnicities were trying to get along, right? We're trying to do ministries, and it was chaos, right? You start a church service at 9, the Jamaicans don't show up till 9:30, right? Because they're on island time, man. They come in, they're chilling out, right? 9 o'clock and the pastor's getting mad, man. Jamaicans are late, Asians are early. All the white people are kind of on time and they find the same seat to sit in for the last 10 years. And then the worship would start, man, and the Jamaicans bring life. It's like, let's go, ding, ding, ding. And they're dancing and the Asians are, And the white people are just like trying to be cool. Like, it's called the white man overbite. The question is, man, do we live a boring, mundane life, or are we here to bring salt to the world? To make it live, to look at your life as if it's enchanted, as if there's something magical going on in your life, the way that you do business, the way you carry yourself, the way that every day when you go to your 9 to 5 or whatever it is, you're making the world a better place. There's no sacred, there's no secular, there's no pastor, there's just you. Even this job, I didn't grow up in the church, so I'm not a very good pastor, all right? I'm not good at this job. Don't tell Ray this if you know Ray Johnston. He hired me a few years ago. I'm not good at this job. I'm not a good, like Ricky is a pastor, right? He loves you guys. He knows your names. He cares about when you're sick. He'll meet you. He knows, oh, how did it go last week? He cares about you. That's why he had this pastoral moment. I saw him today. He knew everybody's names, got everyone's stories. I meet people at our church in the lobby and they're like, hi, Pastor Mark, my name's Dave. I'm like, hey, Dave. And then you know what's going on in my mind right at that moment? I go, delete. I only got so much room in here, and Dave, I don't think we're ever gonna talk again. So I'm gonna delete your name because I don't think it's gonna be useful. That's how bad I am at this job. I once told a woman that her husband was dead, and I had the wrong guy. I went to the hospital to visit a guy, and I had visited him on the Friday, and then I went in on the Monday, and I walked into the room, and I saw what looked like him lying on the bed. And as I went in and looked, the nurse turned me around and said, oh, no, I'm sorry. I said, I'm just here for a visit. She said, I'm sorry, he's dead. Now, when someone says he's dead and you're a pastor, say, who? Who's dead? But I didn't. I'm like, okay, must have been the same guy that I came and visited on Friday. But they had moved him to a whole other hospital, and I didn't know that. So I just went home and went back to the office, and his wife was there, and she came into my office, and I said, he's dead. And we mourned his life for 1 hour. And then I walked out, and I found out that he wasn't dead. And I came back in the room, and I had to tell her. He was like, hey, remember that thing we were talking about? You guys ever heard of Saddleback Church before? Saddleback, like one of the most famous churches in California, in all of America. Ricky and I grew up reading all the Saddleback stuff. We want to be, we could be Rick Warren one day, purpose-driven life, purpose-driven church, all the ministry stuff. Loved it. So I got a phone call last summer, and they said, we would like you to come and preach at Saddleback Church. I mean, among us preachers, man, that's like Super Bowl of preaching. All right, so I gotta be perfect. I gotta do everything right at Saddleback, right? Everything's gotta be zoned in. All these Orange County, perfect, got their life together. Not like this crew here, like people who's got, So I'm gonna get up there and everything's gonna be perfect. So I prep this perfect sermon and I start preaching this sermon and I'm like, hey, let me tell you something. Some of you feel really bad about yourself. You know the Apostle Paul was a murderer? How many of you in this room have ever murdered anybody? Raise up your hand. That's what I said. So in the first service, everything was fine. And then in the second service, it was fine. But then in the third service, I said, hey, you ever murdered anybody? Raise up your hand if you ever murdered anybody. And I look over here and I see a hand go up. And I'm like, on the stage. It turns out it was the sign language lady. Well, the Apostle Paul, he's murdered some people. You ever murdered anyone? Raise up your hand. And I'm like, Guys, I'm never getting invited back to Saddleback in my life. I suck at my job, man. And you know what? That's okay, because sometimes you do too. And you feel the weight and the burden of it as if you're supposed to be perfect at your job. The reality is you're never gonna be perfect, but God didn't expect it to be because he's perfect for you. Some of you let the failures of your job affect your emotional state so much so that you think you have to be successful all the time. Do you know it's not a sin to fail? It's a sin not to be obedient to God. That's it. Failure is not a sin. If you're not failing, you're not trying. You gotta try some stuff, and you're gonna fail. And some of you, we have the most anxious, depressed generation in the history of the Western world right now. We're the most suicidal that we've ever been, most isolated, most depressed, most lost, even though we have more medication, more technology, more industry, more education, more politics than we've ever had. We are more lost and broken and scared and anxious than ever before. Why? One of the reasons is I think some of you wake up and you don't realize something that this text just told you, which is this: you are needed. You are needed. And some of you, especially men, you wake up and if you don't feel needed, you feel lost. I know exactly what that's like. I have 3 daughters, like I said. And if you're a dad, who's a dad of daughters here, right? It can be rough sometimes, It's just like, I live in a house of women. And it's just like, just constant criticism, right? Just like, what are you doing, idiot? Just like, at least, and if they're saying it, if they're not saying it, they're projecting it. But here's the thing, man. At work, I'm the boss. At work, I'm the man. I walk into work, I am respected. I dream up ideas, 4 people just scurry off and do it. It's incredible. And then I leave that office and I start to drive home. And I pull up to that driveway and I see all those 4 faces looking out the window at me, just like, idiot. I haven't even done anything yet. You forgot the garbage, you did this, Dad, why would you ever say that? Blah, blah, blah. And all I want to do is go back to work. Because at work, I'm needed. And the problem, the strife of many men in our culture is that they get home and they feel unneeded and lost. They don't know what to do. And Jesus is saying right here, right now, you are desperately needed for such a time as this, to be salt, to be light, to let the world see your life as a man and a woman and say you are needed. God appointed you right now for this moment to live here or wherever you live. Wherever you live. God says, I want you here for such a time as this, to be salt and light in the world. Here's the other thing salt does, it disinfects, right? Have you ever, salt makes things tasty, but the other thing it does is disinfects. You guys ever been to Israel? You ever been to the Israel trip and gone on the Dead Sea, where it's like 99% salt, and you get in the water and you realize you got cuts on your body you didn't know about? You're like, oh gosh, I got cuts, because that's the salt. You know what part of your job in this world is? To disinfect the sin. To look at the sin of the world and how it's messing people up and actually save people from it. So we were living in this little suburb outside of Vancouver when we started our church, and people started coming up to me and they said, hey, listen, this is a big area for swingers, right? You know what swingers are? Like people who are married, but then they kind of have an open marriage and they'll just go be intimate with a bunch of people and just swap out couples. And this is a whole swinging thing, right? I'm sure no one down here in Palm Springs knows anything about it. So up in Vancouver, there was a whole swinging community. So I found out about this and I was like, okay, well, how does it work? And they're like, well, what happens is they go to this grocery store and they take a pineapple and they flip it upside down and they walk around the grocery store, and then everybody knows that's the symbol for walk up to them and say, hey, do you want to swing? And here's my husband and here's your wife and da-da-da. And so I was like, that's interesting. Okay. I said, well, here's the crazy thing. I get up in front of 4,000 people every weekend. Maybe I should say something about this. So I got up on the weekend and I said, hey, everybody, just so you know, that grocery store, you know the one you all shop in. Here's how the swingers have figured it out. They go there and they take the little pineapple and they flip it over and they walk through and then they approach each other. So here's what I think all of us should do. Every time you go to the grocery store, take a pineapple, flip it over upside down and walk around. We're gonna confuse the whole system. And then every time someone walks up to you and says, hey, how you doing? I see your upside down pineapple. You'll be able to, yeah. And you have an upside down life and you need to know Jesus. So the first time I went to this grocery store, I posted social media to inspire my people. This was the shot of me there. Or you can all just be dead quiet when you know systems of sin and demonic oppression are all around you and go on with your day and make your tea time. Our job is to do something about it. Not just sit around and know that in the dark corners of our culture, there's really messed up stuff going on, but I'm gonna stay quiet about it. God has called us to flavor the world, but also to disinfect it. Okay, last, look at this image and then I'll pray for you, of verse 16. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good deeds and glorify your who? Father who's in heaven. Some of you, here's what I wanna leave you with. Some of you have a vision and version of God where he's mean and he's disengaged, and that has made you someone who doesn't wanna believe in God. But what Jesus did is he presented the concept of God as a father. And I don't know about your father, my father growing up abandoned me, drank too much, was an alcoholic, left us when I was 8 or 9 years old. Him leaving us gave me the trauma of that, gave me Tourette's syndrome, which is why I do little twitches and noises up here with my life. He died when I was 15 years old, never even told me he was sick so I could say goodbye to him. We all have father stories, father wounds. Many of you had great fathers. Jesus shows us the ultimate father, that when you believe in him, you don't just get God, you get a father who will never drink too much, who will never leave you and abandon you. He will never beat on your mom. You got a good father who chases you down to save you from yourself, right? Listen, if you have the story of the prodigal son in your mind, and this little son ran off and took all the money, he took off, and then the minute he wants to come back, the father goes out and he wraps his own robe around him and throws a party, and he says, my son is lost and he's found. What a beautiful image. And some of you sitting here right now, you gotta know that's the vision of God that Jesus is pleading with you to embrace, the idea of a father who chases you down, chases you. You understand that? The amount of things he's done. So my friend John, he started this ministry in Nicaragua a bunch of years ago, okay? He builds wells and then helps out the poor people in Nicaragua. And he was down there a couple of years ago doing a project in Nicaragua, and he was surfing, all right? So one of the things about surfing is you're out in the water, you're kind of waiting for the next wave. So there's about 20, 30 people all sitting there surfing. And all of a sudden he kind of goes up to this 22-year-old girl, says, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? She says, I'm from Vancouver, Canada. And here's my name, and I just down here in Nicaragua, I'm surfing. He goes, oh, that's funny. I know a guy from Vancouver, Canada. His name's Mark Clark. He's one of the pastors at our church, and we just hired him. And she goes completely white. And she's like, what did you say his name was? Mark Clark? And she's like, oh my goodness. And he's like, what? And she said, I didn't grow up with Jesus in my life at all. I did whatever I wanted with my life. I walked into Village Church and heard him give the gospel, and I accepted Christ 2 years ago, completely changed everything to do with my life. But about 6 months ago, I decided I didn't want God in my life anymore. I wanted to do whatever I wanted with my body. I wanted to do whatever I wanted with my experiences. I'm young, I want to do whatever. So I grabbed my passport and I started jumping around countries to escape God. I wanted to run away from the church. I wanted to run away from God. I wanted to run away from anybody who was gonna have any influence on me. So I jumped around countries, and I decided 2 days ago to come to Nicaragua where I could hide from God. And I came out surfing, and now I'm here in the water in the middle of nowhere, surfing, escaping Mark Clark. And you come, this is how good God is. He'll just paddle randomly. Mark Clark, remember, Mark Clark, right? It's like, what the? You could be out in the middle of the ocean and he will chase you down because he's better than you. He loves you more than you love yourself. He's so good. He's so good. He's a good father. He's a father. And Jesus is going, you live your life to his glory and his fame. You will find identity and purpose till the day that you die, and you will endure. And so to the business person, you do that with your work. And as they say, when you wake up tomorrow morning, it won't be like you're going to work. You're there to serve a father. You won't have to go to work another day in your life because it won't feel like work. It's part of your identity. It's part of your purpose. And you don't let it beat up on you anymore because your identity isn't whether you succeed and have a good quarter. It's in who you are in Jesus, even if you're failing miserably. The business world wants to tell you you're only a winner when you're succeeding and everything's up and to the right, and the gospel comes along and goes, guys, just embrace the fact you're a loser. We all lose. We're all sinners. But Jesus Christ finds us awesome, finds us worthy of his own death and resurrection. So Father, I do pray that that is the story running through our hearts and minds, not the story of failure, not the story of trying to be successful. It is so beautiful, Jesus, when you send out the 72 in Luke chapter 10, and they all come back and they're excited at their success. The demons listen to us. We can cast out, we can do miracles, and you look right at them and say, don't be happy that you can cast out demons. Be happy that your names are written in heaven. Love your salvation more than your success. I pray that's true, but every person in here looking to you for hope, a good father who declares on them, you are my beloved in whom I am well pleased. In Jesus' great name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, God bless you, Southwest Church. Thanks for being here, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Love y'all.
We hope that you enjoyed that message from Pastor Mark Clark. It's our prayer that this message would help you discover what it truly means to live daily as God's people and how to walk in the fullness of Christian living each and every day of the week. So from all of us here at Southwest Church, we can't wait to see you again soon. Have a great week, and God bless.